Hello, and welcome to this week's Art Like Minisode, the mini podcast to hold you over in between our regularly scheduled programming with the Art Like Everything Else podcast. Last week on our podcast, I briefly talked about the idea of how some of the people you want to be in your corner when you are creating the world you desire to be in aren't actually going to always be in your corner. And sometimes that is simply beyond their own understanding and it's beyond their means, but that doesn't really mean it hurts any less. And so to talk about this, I'm actually going to use characters from the movies we discussed in last week's episode to elaborate a bit further on in this regard. So in the movie Cool Runnings that we discussed in the last podcast episode, there is a character named Junior. And so Junior comes from money. His father had to work his way up more or less to be as successful as he was in Jamaica. And then we see his father, as a result, have a very particular idea of what it is he wants his son to be doing. And because he has this idea of what his son should be doing, he doesn't support his son pursuing what it is that will make him happy, which is being a part of the Olympics, whether that was through running or through being on the bobsled team. His father was against him doing anything that did not align with the plan he had for him. And then on the other side of the coin, we have Jose Hernandez, the main character in our second movie, A Million Miles Away. And Jose Hernandez grew up in a family of immigrant farmhand workers, and they did not see a world in which anyone of their status would have gotten the chance to be in NASA and go to space. And so they weren't able to support Jose in that regard and his desire to go beyond what it was that more or less people expected him to kind of just fall into. And we see that both of these characters, despite really, really wanting the support from their family and really, really wanting the reality that they choose for themselves to include a lot of those in their community, we don't really see them get that from the beginning. And so for Junior in Cool Runnings, it more or less it upset him really that his father did not want him to pursue his dream of being in the Olympics. And we see his father talk down on him whenever he would bring it up. And there is even a part in the movie where even though after Juniors has already gotten into the Olympics, his father still comes and tries to get him and is like, "You're not allowed to be here. You need to go home." And on one hand, you can kind of see, if you consider the father's point of view, you can kind of see where he's coming. If you grew up struggling, especially financially, and you worked really, really hard to finally get the ability to sustain not only you, but your family, and for you all to live a good life, you absolutely would sort of have that fear of things regressing or of your children not having that same financial standing as you if you do not sort of stay on top of what it is you feel they should be doing to maintain that standing. And it's upsetting, I'm sure, to watch your child more or less what you might think or consider play with your fears, but it doesn't really make it okay for Junior, who is the child in this situation, to feel like he's not actually being supported or encouraged in things he actually wants to do. And so Junior did end up having to go through a lot of this journey without the support from his family like he wanted, but he did find support outside of his family. And that's not unlike our character, Jose Hernandez, who, despite a lot of reservations from his family about him even attempting to go into space and be a part of NASA, despite all of those reservations about whether or not that's the reality for someone who's spent their entire life moving from city to city and being a farmhand. And we see his father even doubting it, and his mother is like, I mean, okay, I guess. But also, looking at it from their perspective, the reality that Jose saw for himself felt pretty much impossible for them to see. because nothing like that's ever been done before. Again, if you watch this, you know it's a biopic, and this is about Jose Hernandez, who was the first immigrant farm worker who worked his way up and did eventually get on the NASA team and go out into space. And so this reality, especially during this time, like they were born in, well, he was born in like the 1960s. He was born in the 1960s. That time for people of color was not a very nice time. And so things were already incredibly difficult for them, even with the work that they were able to do. And so for their son to be like, I want to do this thing that is almost completely unheard of in regards to people who look like us. It couldn't compute in their heads. And so they weren't able to show up for him how he might have wanted them to. Because guess what? They didn't have the funds. Like they had to move from city to city. And even when they did eventually sort of settle down, they were still like working paycheck to paycheck, essentially, to make ends meet. And so it's really difficult to see a world that your child sees that seems quite literally impossible, and to want to support that child in that. But just because Jose did not get that support from his family, his immediate family, he did actually eventually find that support in his wife, who did actually was like, all right, if this is what you want to do, what are the steps we need to pursue that? And she worked with him on like breaking down all of the things. It was like, all right, well, if I need XYZ, she's like, well, how do we go about you getting XYZ? And so sometimes, like I've been saying this entire time, the immediate people you might want in your circle might not be there in the beginning because it's impossible for them to see what it is you see in this new world of yours. But that doesn't mean you won't find people who want to see the world the way you do and will want to join you on that journey in you making the world look and feel the way you want it to feel. You're not alone in seeing things in any particular way. And even though it may hurt that the people you want to see the world as you see it don't, it doesn't mean you won't have people next to you viewing and being a part of your new world. And yeah, thank you for listening. Be sure to check out last week's episode. We talk about turning your back on the world, or when the world turns its back on you, you turn your back on the world. Quote from Timon from Lion King and Pumbaa. But be sure to check out that episode. And I do have another podcast episode. Our regularly scheduled programming will be out next week. But yeah, that's all I got. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.